Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to delegates and colleagues. We're starting the meeting shortly of the informal working group for Leadership Dialogue 2 of Stockholm Plus 50. We'd like to just wait for all the participants to come in. So we would like to ask for your indulgence and patience, please. We'll start in a few minutes. Thank you. I would also like to remind the participants that if it's possible, please change your name to start with your country name or your organization name, followed by your personal name. Otherwise, we won't be able to see what your affiliations are, and it'll be very difficult for us to determine what you are representing. So if it's possible, please change your name so that it would have a display that's easier for us to be able to identify you. Thank you. Again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. I would like to welcome everybody who has kindly been able to attend this meeting, which is the first meeting of the informal working group of Leadership Dialogue 2 Achieving a Sustainable and Inclusive Recovery from the COVID pandemic of Stockholm Plus 50 International Meeting. We'd like to start the discussion very shortly, but I would like to just give you a very important reminder. We would like to make sure that we have the involvement of as many people's inputs as possible. We'd very much like to hear as many of your views as possible, but you may also be aware that we have nearly 200 participants at the moment who have signed in for this meeting. So we would like to ask again for your indulgence to make sure that your oral interventions are going to be very brief. We will probably have a time limit of 2 minutes per delegate or 2 minutes per intervention. But there are also other ways in which you can provide your views and have your information expressed. First way is to have it in your chat box. I can see that everybody is using already the chat box to introduce yourselves. That's really great. This will remain active during the meeting as a means for participants to actually have an interactive discussion on the side, so to speak, of the meeting. There will also be a place available to have any questions and answers. These are, if you have any questions and answers regarding the actual theme or regarding the topic. This may, again, if it may be relevant and important for the entire audience, we may be able to pick this up at the end and to pose this to the relevant people who are present at this meeting. Lastly, we will also have a Google Forms that we have sent you the link for in the email a couple of days ago. This contains an opportunity for you to make written submissions, especially if you haven't had the opportunity to make the oral interventions today. We'd very much like to ask you to send in your interventions in written form so that we'll be able to record this and make this reflected in the revision process as well. Lastly, we will hopefully be setting up a community platform, a chat platform based on the GGKP, the Green Growth Knowledge Platform, which has a Green Growth Forum. And you will be able to have, again, written based interaction and interventions and expression of views through that platform. So please watch out in your email inbox for further information about that. Lastly, I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is co-organized between UNEP and the Green Growth Knowledge Platform, who has kindly come in to provide the knowledge base and also the technical backup for this meeting. So I'd like to acknowledge that. I'd like to now start with the meeting, and I would like to welcome the co-hosts, which are Kenya and Sweden, who are the co-hosts for the Stockholm Plus 50 meeting. And I would like to invite a representative of Kenya, Ambassador Njambi, to make her statement, please.
Thank you, Haruko. My name is Irene Kitty from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Kenya. I'm speaking on behalf of Kenya, or rather on behalf of Ambassador Njambi, who has sent her apologies as she will not be able to make it. She's currently airborne. And also on behalf of our Ambassador Susan Mwangi, who's also out of office at the moment. I wish to thank the co-chairs for the work, time and effort they have put towards developing the Zero Draft Leadership Dialogue. And we, as a co-host, we're very grateful for the opportunity, or rather for honoring the invitation to be the co-chairs for these two leadership dialogues. And the meeting is very timely as it comes after the UNEA 5.2 and UNEPAT 50. So this gives us an opportunity to be able to see what we can carry forward from UNEPAT 50 and how we can be able to shape the Zero Draft documents for the leadership dialogue. And just to say a few, Kenya remains committed to supporting the co-chairs, and we look forward to the discussions for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Irene, and for representing the co-host Kenya and for your words. I would like to now ask for the floor for the representative of Sweden, which is the other co-host for the meeting.
Thank you, Haruko. I'm Cecilia Vaverka, Senior Advisor at the Ministry of the Environment, Sweden. A warm welcome to everyone participating today in this first informal working group meeting, focusing on Leadership Dialogue 2, achieving a sustainable inclusive recovery from COVID-19. We're of course very happy that so many have shown interest in engaging and contributing to a successful Stockholm Plus 50. And also, of course, grateful that Germany and Indonesia have agreed to take on this important role as co-chairs for Leadership Dialogue 2, and that you will guide the work of the informal working group leading up to Stockholm Plus 50. So 5 decades after the 1972 UN conference in Stockholm placed environmental concerns at the forefront of the international agenda, Stockholm again welcomes the world in June this year. So following the Climate COP 26, UNEA 5.2, and ahead of the Biodiversity COP and COP 27, we believe that Stockholm Plus 50 is a timely opportunity to reinforce the 1972 principles, bring them to life in the shaping of a sustainable future, and also to provide a platform for visions and actions formulated jointly by nations and stakeholders. And we believe that Stockholm Plus 50 offers a unique moment for a co-creation, multi-stakeholder approach. So in Stockholm in June, we will connect, we will mobilize and accelerate for a sustainable future. Connect climate and environmental action with development priorities and the well-being of present and future generations, leaving no one behind. We will mobilize key public and private stakeholders towards green and just transitions, showcasing solutions, potential of transformation of high-impact value chains. We will accelerate the implementation of commitments related to the 2030 Agenda, to the Paris Agreement, the emerging global biodiversity framework, by generating new actions, raising ambition, and exploring innovative financing solutions. So looking at the broad mandate of Stockholm Plus 50, this certainly comes with great opportunities. At the same time, it comes with some challenges. So I encourage all of you to use this opportunity to really prioritize and hone in on how Stockholm Plus 50 can make a difference, because only by focusing on a couple of key issues, actionable recommendations, I think we can make a real contribution to accelerating actions for sustainable and inclusive recovery and transition. So very much looking forward to a fruitful discussion today, as well as in our future meetings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cecilia, a representative from the co-host Sweden. I would also like to, on behalf of UNEP, I would like to thank all of you to be attending this meeting. My name is Haruko Kusu, and I work for UNEP as the Secretariat of Stockholm Plus 50 and acting in a role capacity of the principal coordinator for the meeting. And I'd like to very much welcome the co-chairs, Germany and Indonesia, for leading this discussion, a very important leadership dialogue theme. And I would like to now welcome the co-chairs to make a few statements about their visions about the meeting. So I would like to first call upon Mr. Stefan Kontius, who is the Commissioner for the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development of Germany.
Thank you, Haruko. Thank you, distinguished colleagues from Kenya and Sweden. His Excellency Ambassador Ibnu Bayu Omo, and dear ladies and gentlemen. The Stockholm Conference in 1972 was a very important event, laying the foundations for the international work for the environment and its institutional architecture. Since then, this special work stream of international diplomacy and policy making moved from the fringes to the mainstream. as the triple crisis of climate change, nature and biodiversity loss, and pollution and waste became a major concern everywhere on this planet. As the last IPCC report shows, climate change is causing increasingly irreversible losses in terrestrial, freshwater, coastal, and open marine ecosystems, endangering their resilience and natural adaptive capacity. Therefore, the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic should take into account the planetary boundaries and be in line with the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda adopted in 2015. Today, we offer a platform and space which enables us to listen to your concerns and to collect concrete, substantial input for the further preparation of the Leadership Dialogue 2 at the Stockholm Plus 50 conference. We believe that this conference will be an excellent opportunity to look into possibilities and opportunities for the next years, how to accelerate action, how to use the recovery work going on in a way which is in line with our goals and targets. Most notably, we would like to hear your perspective on how short and midterm green recovery measures could contribute to a lasting, equitable, and sustainable recovery from COVID-19. As mentioned in the background paper, we believe it to be crucial to focus and target those key economic sectors and value chains that require urgent attention and investment to secure a fair and employment-oriented green recovery. It's time that the way we produce goods and services becomes more sustainable and respects planetary boundaries. The success of the UNEA last week in Nairobi shows that multilateralism is strong, that if we want, we can achieve progress, we can take decisions in this very complicated, consensus-oriented way we have in the United Nations, despite the current crisis we are facing. This was very important, and we believe that the success of the UNEA, and especially the mandate to negotiate a convention concerning marine litter and plastics, shows us that we can have an impact which will save the world from catastrophes, and we should work together to make this happen. With this, I would like to hand over to my colleague, His Excellency Ambassador Ibnu Wayutomo, who will also provide you with some introductory words. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Irene, Ms. Cecilia Faberca, Mr. Stefan Contius, distinguished delegates. Good evening from Jakarta. I thank you all for having joined us and at this session, and also thank you the co-hosts, Sweden and Kenya, and the UNEP Secretariat for organizing the Stockholm Plus 50 process. The theme recovery is very timely for all of us. 2 years into the pandemic, we have faced multi-layered political, economic, social, and environmental challenges. We have witnessed many cooperation and initiatives across the globe. However, considering the level of challenges, we need to do more. We need to do together. As you are aware, Indonesia is the president of the G20 this year. We have taken up the main theme of recover together, recover stronger. Recovery is also the objective of our discussion today. In this regard, allow me to share several points. First, a strong recovery is an inclusive recovery. We need to close the widening gap between developed and developing countries. Today, we have a large number of vaccines in circulation. A total of 17.5 billion doses has been ordered, more than enough to vaccinate the whole world. Yet, the gap in vaccination rate remains wide. There are 36 countries with less than 10% vaccination rate. Around 85% of the Africans, or around 1 billion people, have only received a single shot. Meanwhile, several countries have already started their fourth injections. A true and sustainable recovery needs to close this gap. Second, a strong recovery is a transformative recovery. The pandemic should become our momentum to take a big leap for a green and sustainable global recovery. We must work on this transformation in high impact sectors, as elaborated in the background paper. On energy, for instance, we need to make energy transitions a reality by promoting the support of technology, investment, and the funding of green development and energy transition, particularly for the developing countries. I also wish to emphasize the importance of digital transformation and health. Thirdly, we need to strengthen global collaboration to achieve concrete deliverables for the people. With these multidimensional challenges, as usual, it's not an option. Global partnership and collaboration need to be enhanced at all levels. Intergovernmental, the private sectors, civil society, and all other stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very delighted to see that participants of LD2 have represented various demographics from member states, observers, and CSOs. Your experience and best practices will be very valuable in finding the most suitable ways toward recovery, bearing in mind that there is no one-size-fits-all solution. I look forward to our discussion and your input today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ibnu, for your very valuable words, and also to Mr. Stefan Contius as well. And those were the two co-chairs, Germany and Indonesia. I would like to now move to the introduction on the overview of background papers, which will be given by my colleague, Stephen Stone, from who is the Deputy Director of the Economy Division at the United Nations Environment Program. Stephen, you have the floor.
Okay, thanks very much, Haruko. Good evening, Ambassador. Good day to all. Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. Can you see my screen now? Okay, good. I'm not sure if it's exactly, okay. So, well, colleagues, I was asked to give you a brief presentation of how this leadership dialogue on sustainable and inclusive recovery fits into the other leadership dialogue.
Just to interrupt, we see a screen, but it's the welcoming screen and not your presentation.
Right. Let me try again. Yeah. Better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Good. I was asked to give a brief presentation of how this leadership dialogue on sustainable and inclusive recovery fits into the larger picture of the other leadership dialogues. coming from the original modalities resolution passed by the General Assembly, which basically called for how Stockholm Plus 50 would work towards a healthy planet with prosperity for all. This leadership dialogue on sustainable and inclusive recovery, as you've heard from the Commissioner and from the Ambassador, focuses on the immediate task of rebuilding societies, economies, jobs, health around the world in an equitable way. A strong recovery is an inclusive recovery. It's a transformative recovery. We heard from our ambassador from Indonesia. This fits within a larger picture, and if I am able to proceed, within two other leadership dialogues, which are also equally critical for moving towards a healthy planet and prosperity for all. The first is Leadership Dialogue 1, which focuses on a healthy planet and prosperity for all, focusing on transforming our relationship with nature and restoring ecosystems. This leadership dialogue is co-chaired by Canada and Ecuador, and they'll be having their dialogue later this week. It's also focusing on producing and consuming sustainably and fighting pollution, as well as social justice and intergenerational.
Stephen, can I interrupt very briefly? I'm very sorry from a planning perspective. Can you leave presentation mode because you are showing your notes as well at the same time? So I think to make it easier, just leave presentation mode and make sure your screen is big and it'll be a bit easier.
Oh, leave presentation mode. The presentation mode. Not really sure.
You can leave it like that. What you have is perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thanks very much. Sorry, I wasn't aware how it was being perceived. So coming back then, colleagues, so Leadership Dialogue 1, focusing on the big picture, the relationship to nature and how to reset that relationship. Leadership Dialogue 3, focusing on how to accelerate implementation. So this Leadership Dialogue is focusing on a sustainable and inclusive recovery. Leadership 3 takes that into the longer term perspective. How is finance to be scaled up? What about the governance and institutional reforms that are needed to create that pathway forward for technology, finance, and capacity to be scaled? The digital transformation and effective partnerships that can lift that recovery into an effective transformation. And finally, those collective actions and strengthened cooperation, which makes the most out of this Stockholm Plus 50 moment. So coming back to Leadership Dialogue 2, the paper that you have before you, which is on the web, which is a creation of the co-chairs of UNEP, and actually many UN agencies that work together with Sweden and with Kenya to craft the very first piece, is the subject of discussion today. And it's a work in progress. So as both Stefan Kontius and Ambassador Ibnu requested earlier, this is your chance to feed in for us to hear you and to take your input into that next version, which will go to the preparatory meeting. And here I just very quickly put onto the screen on the 28th of March, when countries are coming together to discuss the leadership dialogues prior to Stockholm Plus 50 in June. So with that, Haruko, I will come back to you. I hope that's a very quick overview. My apologies for the technical difficulties on this very first outing, but it's just a delight to be with you all, to listen in, and I hope to reveal a little bit of what Stockholm Plus 50 can bring forward for all of us. Thank you, Haruko, back to you.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for your overview. I hope all of you had a little bit of a taste of how this Leadership Dialogue 2 fits within the overall Stockholm Plus 50, and especially in comparison to the other leadership dialogues that are happening. And it's quite important that we continue to consider the bridges between the leadership dialogues so that as a whole, we can deliver together. Thank you very much for that. At this point, I would now like to start with the interactive discussion part of this meeting. Before I do so, I would like to just remind you of some of the housekeeping announcements. First of all, we would like to very much hear from you as many as possible in the next less than 1 hour that's left, less than 2 hours that's left with us. So we will try to be, we may be a little bit strict on the time limits. We are hoping that we would like to ask you to limit your interventions to under 2 minutes. We will have somebody who will come in to announce when you have 30 seconds left to your intervention. And we may also be able to ask you, we might have to ask you to close the microphone at the if it gets a little bit too long. Also, we would like to try and see if we can get as many different variety of geographies and stakeholders as possible, as was mentioned by Ambassador Ibnu Wahutomo. So we have received some requests of taking the floor. We'll try to address that as much as possible, but we may also be asking for certain sectors or certain regions, if you might be able to raise your hand in such a way so that we can try to get as wholesome as input as possible. So we'd like to, again, ask for your indulgence on that. And there are also other ways in which you can make interventions, including through the chat box, which will be recorded, although not addressed during the meeting live, and also through the written statements that you can provide the inputs to. So I'd like to make that housekeeping announcement as well. I would like to now turn to the first discussion round, which is focusing on the actions for recovery in key COVID-affected sectors and value chains. And on that, I would like to call upon Germany, one of the co-chairs, to lead the discussion and to set the scene. Commissioner Stefan Contius, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Haruko, for giving me the floor. In the upcoming discussion, we are going to look into those priority actions that are required to transform high-impact sectors such as food, energy, and manufacturing in such a way that they allow for a low-carbon, resource-efficient, inclusive, and resilient recovery. I believe two aspects will be particularly important. On the one hand, the need to transform value chains in such a way that they are more resilient to short-term global disruptions, as the COVID-19 pandemic has shown, but also to long-term forward-looking transitions that have to take place so that we achieve our climate and biodiversity goals, and also the goal of an inclusive recovery. As it is already well known, the encroachment of nature's boundaries has led us to such a global pandemic in the first place. We are also aware that the strong use and depletion of natural resources is a root cause for the increase in greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity loss, and pollution. Our current food system alone is, as of now, responsible for 60% of global biodiversity loss on land. From you today, I would like to hear what priority measures will help us to decouple our economies from resource depletion. The second aspect I would like to raise is inclusive action and the imperative obligation to leave no one behind, neither our present nor our future generations. The use of resources as of now and the related benefits and environmental impacts are unevenly distributed across countries and regions. This has to change. Such a transition needs to be just, reduce dependencies, and increase economic diversification. Different studies indicate the opportunities such a transition can create for green job creation. We would like to hear from you how can recovery investments best support the generation of such opportunities. Thank you very much. I hand over to you, Haruko.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Stefan Contius. I would now like to open the floor based on that scene-setting statement that was made by Mr. Contius. And we have received a couple of requests, pre-registered requests to take the floor. So I'd like to pick up perhaps a few of them before we start opening the floor to others. First, I would like to go to a couple of member states. And I see, let's see, Ms. Carrie Holland from U.S. State Department. If you're there, please raise your hand so that it's easy for us to open the microphone for you. I see Ms. Nina Horowitz. Are you also from the State Department from the United States?
Good morning. Hi, this is Carrie Holland from the United States of America. Oh, I think I'm listed as Nina Horowitz. This is Carrie Holland. Yes, I just wanted to thank the organizers of this informal working group. We find it really important to hear from stakeholders in other member states as we build the conversation moving into Stockholm Plus 50. I think we're coming off the heels of a very successful event at UNEA 5.2 and UNEP at 50. So we would like to thank the co-chairs of this dialogue, also to Indonesia and Germany for your leadership today to provide us concrete recommendations moving forward. We'd also like to express our strong support for Sweden and Kenya and your active leadership in building us towards Stockholm Plus 50 process and the collaborative action-oriented meetings in June. In regards to this first question, as the world looks ahead to rebuilding after the pandemic, there are opportunities to build resilient, diverse, adaptable, and secure supply chains. Improvements in this area could foster growth between reliable trading partners, ensure a sufficient, steady supply of globally of safe, effective, quality-assured products and materials that the world needs. This would apply both to COVID and preparations for future health emergencies, as well as broader categories of critical goods. Thank you.
Thank you very much, United States. I would like to just turn to see if there are any other member states who would like to make an intervention at this time. If you, I'd like to first ask those who are not member states to lower your hand and see if there are any other member states who would like to make an intervention. Okay, so I have Mr. Sebastian Gill from the European Union, I suppose. You have the floor, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to make a short intervention. And I will try to be as concrete as possible, also to explain that I make this intervention on behalf of the European Union and its member states, so representing our collective view in this regard. And I would like from the outset to thank the UNEP for the very good paper, and the Sweden, Kenya for the leadership on this process, and very much to Germany and Indonesia for co-chairing this leadership dialogue preparations. I think it's very important that we are setting the ground for the green recovery of this pandemic, but also bearing in mind that unfortunately this will not be only in the last crisis that we are or will be facing, as we've heard from Stefan, that there is a crisis that is unfolding currently, and we are pretty much aware that it will have impacts on value chains, and particularly on the food chains in the near future. So we also should be mindful of setting a standard for any recovery stimulus actions for the future. What we expect of this process is identification of a set of very specific recommendations for the stimulus measures, that would lead to an agreement that public spending for stimulus measures should be aligned with climate, biodiversity, and environmental policies. And I believe I should also say we should build on our very successful discussion at UNEA last week, where we had an agreement on nature-based solution definition that should also help us defining the conditions for the stimulus packages. As we know, the situation it's not very good. We've seen UNEP's report showing concrete figures that only a small percentage of the stimulus spending is aligned with the environmental policies. In particular, that discussion should lead to an agreement that multilateral development banks and financial institutions align their portfolios as a whole with the environmental, biodiversity and climate goals, as goals contained in the Paris Agreement, the Glasgow Climate Pact, and as mentioned, the nature-based solutions agreed at UNEA definition. And to enhance that credit risk assessment and disclose climate and nature impacts. And we very much—
I have to tell you that your 2 minutes is up, so please wrap up your intervention. Thank you.
Okay, my last sentence will be the full support that we remain focused and target the high impact sectors, those that are listed in your paper and affected mostly by the COVID pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gill, for that. I'd like to now turn to see if there are any other stakeholder groups that would like to perhaps make their statement, especially from perhaps the non-WEOG countries. And I recognize there are a couple of people who have asked for pre-registered for an intervention. So I'm just looking down the list here, and perhaps I would like to go to the business sector, perhaps. I see Mr. Ken Kamau from the Content Lab Africa, who has asked for the floor. If Mr. Kamau is here, we very much appreciate if you could raise your hand so that we can open the microphone for you. Mr. Kamau, would you be able to raise your hand so we can open the microphone? Okay, I don't see his hand is up at the moment, so I'd like to go down the list for another stakeholder group here. And I'm looking down the list right now. We have an environmental NGO, Mr. Arunabha Ghosh from the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, India. If you're present, please raise your hand so that we'll be able to open the microphone for you. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you to UNEP for the background paper and to the co-chairs, Indonesia and Germany, of this leadership dialogue for giving this opportunity. I represent the Council on Energy, Environment and Water from India. When we talk about the issue of a recovery, a just recovery from the COVID pandemic, we have to think about how do we align our next set of policies that provide for jobs, for growth, and for sustainability. And that means when we look at specific sectors, particularly the energy transition, we have to look at a future where we not only aim for cleaner energy, but we also ensure that it does not lead to deindustrialization, that it does not lead to degrowth, that it does not lead to loss of jobs. In particular, I am concerned about the fact that the industrial sector has to rapidly decarbonize across emerging markets and developing countries, even as these are also the countries where industries and manufacturing has to grow. A critical fuel for this will be green hydrogen. And as we look across the world, we need a common framework to pool together the resources, the capital, the technical talent, to find the ways to form the common standards and rules to ensure there is secure trade for a critical fuel such as this. And how will we make sure that that happens without widening the technology divide? How do we make sure that a critical new technology such as green hydrogen is developed in a way that developed and developing countries, rich and poor countries, small and big countries can partake of this new energy technological frontier? And therefore, we wanted to place on the table the idea of a green hydrogen network or partnership or an alliance that can bring countries together to develop the technology, to deploy the technology, to ensure that we have the rules of the game set for a rules-based order for secure energy transition across developed and developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ghosh. Just to remind you, you will probably hear some very distant chimes, and that's actually indicating whether your time is up. There will be one bell ringing, 30 seconds to your time up, and then you'll hear a longer chime. That means your 2 minutes is up. So please take note of that as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Ghosh, for that. I'd like to now turn to perhaps a representative from the youth. I'm aware that the Stockholm Plus 50 Youth Task Force member has asked for the floor, and I'd like to give the floor to the representative from the Youth Task Force, please. And if you're there, I would very much appreciate if you could raise your hand, please. Just trying to look at Ms. Yoko Lu. Yes, you have the floor. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, sorry.
Yes,
thank you for the floor. Thank you. Thank you for the floor, dear chairs, member states, and distinguished delegates. I am Yoko Lu, representing Canada or Japan, speaking on behalf of the Stockholm Plus 50 Youth Task Force. COVID-19 has demonstrated the existing threats to the global neocolonial paradigm. The youth stepped as volunteers on the front line from vaccine drives, marching in the street for climate action. Youth covers 40% of the world's population, and more than half of the youth have lost their jobs due to COVID-19. Vaccine apartheid showed existing healthcare inequalities. Countries capable of such set up parallel systems for COVID-19 patients, while others failed altogether. Global North countries are discussing the fourth booster dose, while developing states are at less than 10% vaccinated population. Rural and indigenous communities require special accommodations to be properly informed and vaccinated accordingly. We recognize that the achievement of a comprehensive and sustainable recovery from COVID-19 is multisectoral. The foundation of which is built upon is the implementation of technology powered by innovative, clean, and renewable energy, as well as circular economic principles. This technology will have no purpose without access to adequate healthcare facilities and treatment for all global citizens. Funding for sources vaccine access and healthcare to developing countries is paramount to addressing vaccines cost inequality. Youth empowerment is essential for achieving the SDGs during the pandemic, where knowledge exchange is a key process to improve the relationship between the global and South-South cooperation, such as increasing access to data for virtual participation and activities in advocacy and capacity building. Thank you for the floor, Madam and Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being right on time, Ms. Liu. Perhaps we had a few interventions already, and perhaps I'd like to turn to the co-chair, Mr. Stephen Contius, to see if there are any reactions that you would like to make to the first round of oral interventions.
Thank you very much. These were very useful inputs for our work. You know that many countries are now working on what the colleague from India mentioned, the green hydrogen work, and we are very much looking forward that during the G7 presidency, we will be able to have more concrete work realized in this respect. I also very much welcome the comments by those who spoke before and after. These are valuable inputs we highly appreciate, and I would like to hand over now to you, Haruko.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stefan Contius. I'd like to perhaps continue with getting some interventions from the floor. I recognize that I have Ms. Jocelyn Blériot from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, who's representing the philanthropy group. If you are present, it would be great if you could raise your hand so that we can call you on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I will make this intervention very brief and recognize the importance of transforming our consumption and production models in order to tackle the issues that pre-existed the COVID-19 crisis, but which have been made even more relevant in terms of environmental impact, disruption of supply chains, and recognize the importance of circular economy strategies in that recovery when it comes to being at the heart of SDG 12 in terms of eliminating toxicity and pollution from the outset, keeping materials in use and regenerating materials, natural systems. Going back to the innovative pathways for sustainable consumption and production that was adopted at UNEA 4, I think it really is important to look at these strategies and also to make the economic works, recognizing that the current economic model is really hardwired for a take, make, and dispose economy, which entails most of the climate impacts and the biodiversity loss, as it's been recognized and acknowledged by the commissioner from Germany. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak and for organizing the webinar.
Thank you very much for that. I'd like to now turn to some of the hands that have been up for a while. I'd like to recognize Anders Wiekman from the Club of Rome, if I understand correctly. Anders, you have the floor, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much.
Okay, fine. Sorry. Let me begin by saying that when I look at the stimulus packages so far in support of economies after the pandemic, quite few of them have really tried to focus on the concept of building back better. So I think this conference is going to be a very important reminder to governments all over the world that they need to move away from conventional policies and address policies that will help meet the sustainable development goals in a more systemic way. The ambassador talked about the way we use resources. I think we use resources in the world today. They take place as if there was no tomorrow. And we know from the work of the International Resource Panel that more than 50% of carbon emissions and 90% of biodiversity loss is directly linked to the use of natural resources, extraction and processing. So there something has to happen. I represent the Club of Rome. We launched a report 50 years ago, as you know, the Limits to Growth, where we warned for an increasing human footprint. And we now know after 50 years that the footprint is increasing all the time and that we have crossed at least 4 planetary boundaries. So nature's ability to sustain mankind is at risk. And the pandemic has shown how vulnerable we are. The irony, Haruko, is that while we are in serious overshoot, the human footprint is too big. Still 3 to 4 billion people live in poverty. And we know that the footprint is very uneven. In my country, Sweden, roughly 27 tons of materials per year per person. In Southern Africa, maybe 2 tons per person. The Club of Rome, together with Potsdam Institute, Stockholm Resilience Center, and the Oslo Business School, we are launching a report, a 50-year update of the Limits to Growth. It's called Earth for All. And we take a very systemic approach, and we are focusing on what I would call 5 turnarounds, extraordinary turnarounds.
I'd like to inform you that your 2 minutes is up, so I'd like to very much if you could wrap up. Thank you.
Yeah, those turnarounds are, first of all, address poverty. Secondly, inequality. Thirdly, energy. fourthly, food systems, and fifthly, gender. And I would encourage the leadership dialogues to really study this report, because I think we bring to the fore a very systemic approach that will help implement the Sustainable Development Goals agenda. And one of the examples is, of course, to treat materials in a totally different way.
But I'd like to cut your intervention here so that we can allow others to speak. Thank you very much, Mr. Weekman. I'd like to now turn to others who have asked for the floor. I do recognize that there is Mr. Francisco Melo from Brazil who has asked for the floor. If you could raise your hand, that'd be appreciated, Mr. Melo. Would the technicians be able to open Mr. Melo's microphone?
Yes, we've permitted it, but he might be having a technical issue on his side.
Okay, while we're waiting, then perhaps I'll go down the list of hands that have been up. When you're picked, it would be great if you can also mention your organization or country that you're belonging to, as we are unable to see who you are representing. I'd like to call upon Ms. Zoe Magdalene, please. You have the floor. Ms. Zoe Magdalene, are you able to open your microphone or have your microphone opened by the technicians?
We've enabled your mic. I think you will have to accept our request to unmute.
Okay, unfortunately, we are unable to hear you, Ms. Zoe Magdalene. I'd like to then go to another person. I would like to go to probably Mr. Arab Hobala, please. You have the floor.
Do you hear me? Yes.
Yes, we hear you well. Thank you. Please state your affiliation first.
Okay, Arab Obala, I'm the Executive Director of Seed Entrepreneurship for Sustainable Development and a former Chief of SCP in UNEP. First, a couple of general consideration and then specific contribution, and I will do it in very short. I hope that the Stockholm Plus 50 will not focus on general declaration, but will be really the conference of delivery. As we used to say, thinking global, act local. Stockholm Plus 50 should be about acting local. Second, I have been looking at all the background papers, and there is one key stakeholder that is absolutely missing and without whom we cannot do green recovery. I'm referring to the small and medium enterprises, which constitute between 70 and 90% of the workforce in all the countries. And this is missing, and we need to see how to take care of that. The Indonesian ambassador said very clearly that strong recovery should be inclusive and transformative. And without the small and medium enterprises, we cannot do it. Same for decoupling. Now, coming to the questions that we have had on the different topics, it's clear that we clearly need to engage more proactively in public-private dialogues, reaching to local communities and small and medium enterprises, in particular the eco-inclusive small and medium enterprises. For that, and in order to make sure that we are really taking them into account for the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals, I believe government should support the development of an SDG taxonomy framework that integrates and acknowledges the contribution of small and medium enterprises, fostering their overall recognition in the Sustainable Development Goals. And finally, it will be extremely important to have a kind of global platform that connects the global South among themselves with the global North, and make sure that we have the right innovation and technologies that can support the local delivery for building forward better, not building back better, but forward better. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hobala, for your contribution. I'd like to now turn to the co-chair, Commissioner Stefan Contius, for any feedback and response to what you have heard so far. Mr. Contius, please.
Again, very interesting, substantial input for our work. Thank you very much for those who spoke. We are very much looking forward to the report mentioned, which will be delivered in Stockholm by the Club of Rome and the Potsdam Institute. We also heard the other substantial arguments, for instance, on small and medium-sized enterprises. We believe that these inputs are really important for the preparations, and we would like to thank for those who spoke. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Contius. I'd like to close this round of discussion and move to the next discussion. But before that, I'd like to turn to something that has been posted in the question and answer section. I do recognize there's one question that has been posted. What are the priority actions needed to transform high impact sectors such as food, energy, and manufacturing? It might be helpful to include healthcare here, since the pandemic revealed the cost of providing interventions such as vaccines and medication and emergency and ongoing care. Could Stockholm 50 call for universal health care for all as part of the call to leave no one behind? I'd like to see if perhaps Stephen, you would like to respond to this question in the context of the leadership dialogues and the overall Stockholm Plus 50, and also turn to the co-chairs if there are any additional comments that they would like to make.
Haruko, could you go to the co-chairs first, and then I'll come in a moment.
Yes, please.
Okay, if I may start from the German side. We believe that this expert network, which was put together by several institutions with GKP, is an important tool so that stakeholders in governments can get specific country-tailored advice they might need. Second, we believe that we should use opportunities like the conference in Stockholm to compare notes on successful examples, how to move forward quickly in tackling these important work streams. We believe that there are good examples. We should replicate those who were successful. We should understand that conditions in countries are different, take this into account, and work with the appropriate experts and institutions. We have to speed up our action in all these work streams, and we believe that this is possible in case we use what is offered by the international community and by donors, also by those who work in the South-South cooperation area. For this, back to you, Rocco.
Thank you very much. Stephen, would you like to come in to supplement any of this, or are you okay with us?
No, thanks, Haruko. That's good. I'll come in later.
Thank you very much. We have another question that has been posted. How do we leave no one behind when every day millions, perhaps billions, are left behind? How can we better bridge rhetoric with practical action and systemic change to save lives and livelihoods as we face the twin climate and biodiversity crises taking place to a backdrop of energy insecurity and war? I'd like to see if the co-chairs would like to respond to that. I think that is basically the main theme of the Stockholm Plus 50, it sounds. But Stephen, you have the floor, please.
I would say that tackling inequalities in country is one of the major. we have to make sure that the wealth is distributed in a way in country which is fair, so that the extreme form of imbalance in income is somehow adjusted. This is as important as the fight for the environmental concerns. We know from the report back in the 80s of the Brundtland Commission how much the work on social issues and the work on the environment and on the economy is interrelated, and we have to make sure that inequality gets reduced in as many countries as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. With that, I'd like to perhaps wrap up this particular round of discussion. It would be very much appreciated if those who have raised your hand could lower the hand for the time being, and apologies if we weren't able to capture your intervention. And we'd like very much to encourage you to send in your interventions in a short text through the Google Forms that we have sent you the links to. And we'll make sure that we have acknowledged them and take them into consideration in the revision round. I'd like to now move to discussion round 2, which is on harnessing innovations and digital technologies for transparency and disclosure. With this, I'd like to invite Ambassador Ibnu Wahutomo for the scene setting statement. You have the floor, Ambassador.
Thank you, Haruko. The issue of digitalization is very timely for us to discuss, especially in the context of recovery. During the pandemic, we see the growing significance of innovation and digital technologies in our lives. Innovation and collaboration have enabled speedy invention of vaccines, a game changer in our fight against the pandemic. The digital ecosystem has been instrumental in ensuring economic resilience, and it has become a new source for green growth. It has also become an important aspect to facilitate micro, small, and medium enterprises, women, youth, people with disabilities, to help them in accessing the global market, as well as to achieve significant economic, social, and even lifestyle gains. Moving forward, we need to nurture further development of digital transformation in an inclusive way that empowers everyone, everywhere. I'm interested in hearing from our many participants on the topic of advancing digital transformation during and after the pandemic, including how to overcome the gaps in digital literacy, skills, and infrastructure. This discussion hopefully can lead to bigger opportunities for partnerships, collaboration, and co-creation involving various stakeholders. Please, Haruko, I hand over to you to moderate the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ibnu, for the statements. Now I would like to open the floor to those who would like to make interventions. First, I'd like to turn to those who have registered to make interventions under this round. And I'm just looking down the list at the moment. I'd like to perhaps first turn to, let's see, Mr. Louis Akenji from the 21st Century Transformational Economics Commission. Louis Akenji, if you're here, please raise your hand and I'd like to ask you for the floor.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well, thank you.
All right, thank you so much for this opportunity. And I really appreciate the earlier comments that have come up about building back better and now on digitalization. I think this particular leadership dialogue is really important because we risk drawing the wrong lessons from the pandemic if we limit our understanding of it primarily to health issues. What the pandemic has exposed is crumbling healthcare systems, yes, but also poor and short-sighted governance, distrust by the public in institutions, and vast and unacceptable amounts of inequality. So one of the most underestimated concerns around the world right now is the vast and growing amount of inequality that we're seeing. Rising social tensions destroy trust, making it more difficult to solve long-term systemic global challenges in the future. We know, for example, from research that the top 10% of the population is responsible for 50% of greenhouse gas emissions, while the bottom 50% is responsible for only 15%. So we need to take an approach where we adopt universal basic services, where public-private partnerships are created to deliver on critical basic infrastructure that provides social guarantees to citizens. This includes, of course, digital access, but also infrastructure for transportation, education, health, and social care, and housing. Second, we need to allow for fair distribution of opportunities. The wealth of the richest 10% should not be allowed to go above 40% of national income. This is one of the recommendations from the Earth for All project as well. And we need to start introducing progressive charges in countries as well as taxes on wealth to pay for building back better programs. It is, however, not enough to attempt these changes within this perverse economic system. So primarily, we must shift away from the corroding GDP that focuses on equal economic distribution and start looking at well-being indicators to guide our development. I think I'll reserve the rest of my comments for later on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Akenji, for that. I'd like to now turn to perhaps the lists. I see Ms. Susana Baria. You have the floor, please, Susana.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of Public Services International. Regarding the question of harnessing innovation and digital technologies, we want to highlight that the UN General Secretary identified digital public goods as essential in unlocking the potential of digital technologies, particularly for low and middle income countries. It defines digital public goods as digital goods that are publicly managed with an open source ethos. They encourage collaboration and experimentation. They have several advantages, such as the fact that the utilization of big data and artificial intelligence to create such goods in the form of actionable real-time and predictive insight can be critical for governments, communities, and international cooperation through UN agencies in responding to pandemics or other crises, such as the environmental crisis. Yet access to those digital solutions is often limited through copyrights and proprietary regimes, digital trade rules, such as those through trade agreements, such as a comprehensive and progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, limit governments and public institutions' ability to access source code and algorithms, which are central parts of the digital goods. And these also compromise transparency and disclosure. So while they should be, and we endorse the call for concerted global effort to create digital public goods, the limitations to these open goods should also be removed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Baria, for that. I'd like to now call upon a representative from the youth. I see, sorry, your title is very long. So Mr. or Miss Yiren from the Philippines Youth, please. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's actually Wyron Bernard from the Philippines. So I'm going to speak as a seafarer because greener shipping requires new and greener technologies. Continue to transform the world, and the greening of shipping will be of no exception. Around the world, technology boundaries are being tested. Examples are cutting-edge science and engineering leading to technologies for greening shipping abound. New technologies to increase energy efficiency of ships, as well as alternative fuels and the technologies to produce such fuels are important for greener shipping. Actually, this year, the International Maritime Organization has dedicated the World Maritime Theme to be new technologies for greener shipping. We are faced with immense pressure to decarbonize shipping, among others, including marine plastic pollution, which has been pervasive in the industry, especially those that can harness renewable energy. Several other technologies are being developed, aiming to assist in the reduction and prevention of adverse impacts to the marine environment and as biodiversity. New technologies to make greener and more efficient ports are also needed to complement the transition of shipping into a greener future. This will also entail the capacity building of seafarers who will be the future operators of the green shipping world. Thank you very much, co-chairs and the moderator, for acknowledging.
Thank you very much for that. I'd like to now call on Ms. Pallavi Saxena. You have the floor, please, Ms. Pallavi.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I'm Pallavi Saxena, and I'm presenting on behalf of ILEAPS, that is Integrated Land and Atmosphere Interaction. This is a global research project from Future Earth, and I'm representative from India. So I would like to focus on how can we build on successful initiatives such as principles for responsible banking, etc., for climate action. So we can build on successful initiatives by working with members from the banking and insurance industries, technical experts, and key stakeholders to convene ambitious collective action, facilitate shared learning, and co-develop practical resources to equip financial institutions with the knowledge and expertise to embed sustainability into their strategies and operations. That's the first one. The second point can be to facilitate collaborative projects to develop methodologies and tools. Then the third can be encourage harmonization, promote advances in good practice, and support leadership to accelerate growth in the quantity and quality of sustainable financial institutions, and to accelerate change across the investment sector via the Investment Leadership Program. That is a joint initiative with the Principles for Responsible Investment that brings together small groups of leading responsible investors to work on initiatives that are considered leading best practice. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to have my views on the board.
Thank you very much, Ms. Saxena, for that. I'd like to first turn to the co-chair, Ambassador Ibnu, for any feedback that you might have in any of the things that you have heard before we continue on. Ambassador Ibnu.
Thank you, Haruko. I've taken notes all the comments and interventions. I believe they are very valuable in identifying ways and means to further advance innovation and digital transformation. Regarding the digital public goods and digital opportunities and promoting collaboration, everything is very useful for us, and we would like to receive the constructive feedback or sharing experience on this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ibnu. Perhaps I'd like to continue down the list of some hands, and I do also recognize some regions and sectors that are missing. So perhaps I might try to call upon those as we go down the list as well. And I see Mr. Richard Center. You have the floor, Mr. Richard Center.
Oh, yes, hello. Is that supposed to be me?
Yes, I think it's you. Please go ahead.
I'm actually Richard Levicki, so I apologise. I don't know how the wrong name's gone in. It's obviously my side. I just want to make a swift intervention to say that, you know, I understand that there's some specifics that I should be talking about, but generally, you know, I hear people. We've been talking about things like green hydrogen and growth and issues such as this, but these are things which will, I mean, green hydrogen doesn't exist yet. It emits CO2. So climate change is the main issue there. And in terms of growth, I mean, we're going to need degrowth in order to tackle the issues that we have on board. Now, if this meeting is to do anything, then surely we need to really start to attack these issues. And we can't sit around a table and just have everyone talking, saying what comes into their heads. We need to tackle this in a scientific way and, you know, really start to deal with these issues. And also we need negotiations. We need people to come to this from governments who are willing to, you know, actually do things, which I'm concerned, because from what I understand, there's no negotiations at this meeting, and it is a very important meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for your intervention. I'd like to now recognize, going down the list, Ms. Lysinka Latowska. Ms. Lysinka,
thank you very much indeed for the floor. I'm speaking for the Institute for Planetary Synthesis and a growing network of organizations who were perturbed after the lockdown 2 years ago about the deteriorating economic situation, and took out a project which was described in 2 books by the Dutchman Peter Koistra, which were financed by the Dutch government. And the complex economic aspect of the project and the project as a whole was endorsed by the Nobel Prize winner, Jan Tinbergen. It's about a basic income, and if every woman, man, and child had an annual basic income of just 500 a year to spend exclusively on sustainable goods and services, this would help to raise the very poor out of extreme poverty in developing countries. Businesses seeing global markets opening up for sustainable goods and services would direct their advertising in that direction, and gradually also their production. And this would influence people who are in better situations to consider more and more the need for sustainable goods and services and for sustainable development as a whole. This is a way in which one could shift towards a global, sustainable, supplementary economy. And in this particular system, it would be the grassroots every year in consultations amongst one another globally to determine which goods and services could be offered in this system. The system is complex. We're putting it out in its entirety, and it can be looked at our website, which is supplementaryincomeforall.org. And we shall give a longer explanation of how it works and how it would affect each of the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'd like to now go to Ms. Soli Magdalene, please. Ms. Soli Magdalene, would you be able to take the floor? Yes, I think we can hear you almost. Ms. Soli Magdalene, you have the floor. Okay, unfortunately, we haven't been able to hear you, so maybe we'll turn to another participant and perhaps see if we can come back to you. I'd like to recognize Mr. Ahmed Oda on behalf of the Stockholm Plus 50 Youth Task Force. Mr. Oda, please.
Thank you for the floor, Madam Chair. Dear Chair, co-chairs, distinguished delegates, I am Ahmed Oda from Palestine, speaking on behalf of the Youth Task Force of Stockholm Plus 50. We highlight that we highlight that currently 37% of young people globally have never connected to the internet. So while these discussions happen on digital goods, we can't ignore the digital divided and realities we live in. Secondly, we highlight the number of online platforms and tools exist when it comes to environmental data and analysis. Stockholm Plus 50 should call upon the UNEP and the UN Statistical Institute to jointly come up with a strategy on consolidations these. Thirdly, the World Environmental Situation Room that launched the last week at UNEP 50. We call upon the Stockholm Plus 50 international meeting, the mainstream the situation room as a tool for the environmental data and analysis by the all member state and the stakeholders. The recommendation on how to make the data analysis more transparently can be used as a future input to develop the situation room. Finally, we highlight that all the online platform and tools should ensure the data collected on the civil society should not compromise a protection of the human rights defenders globally. Thank you, Madam, for the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ahmed Oda. Perhaps I'd like to take a few more before I close this session, but I'd like to perhaps first turn to Ambassador Ibnu for any feedback if you have. Ambassador Ibnu, please.
Thank you, Aruko. Just if you comment on the last speaker that he highlighted the imbalance between the youth in the world that cannot access the internet, and that's why I mentioned in my opening remarks that we need to nurture the development of digital transformation, so that it has to be done in an inclusive way, so that to empowers everyone and everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ibnu. I'd like to now turn to, I'd very much like to look a little bit more for geographical distribution. I don't think we have had inputs from anybody from Latin America or Latin America and the Caribbean based organization, as well as organizations based in Africa as well. I'd like to know if there's anybody here who is representing organizations from those two regions. I'd very much appreciate if you're from other regions, if you could also lower your hand, please. Is it safe for me to assume from your names that some of you may represent the other regions? So perhaps Mr. or Ms. Charbo Bokengo, NFINN. Are you representing any organization in Africa or Asia or the Latin America and the Caribbean?
Yeah, hello.
Yes, we can hear you well.
Thank you. I am Chabo Bokengo from Cameroon, and I represent the Forest Investment Program of the Climate Investment Fund for Africa. And well, my intervention, we simply try to remind us here that many still don't have access to the internet, which is a barrier is still a barrier among existing institutions and communities for better recovery. Yeah, the issue of implementation of the very good resolutions and outcomes still remains a worry, because what resolutions come out from big meetings and are hardly being implemented and be felt by the local communities. So what we need to do is to build on strongly, work together by strengthening these institutions, bringing more synergies that work for SDGs and including all stakeholder groups like farmers, women, youth, and the rest in the entire SDG goals. For example, the forests and the forest people still remain in their same situations. The forests are going down, their lives are being impoverished, the artisanal fishermen are having their fishes and their livelihood being taken away by very large trawlers, which come right to the coast and not minding or respecting international borders of or the international waters or international waters or territorial waters. So it's really a challenge, and if we work in very strong synergy, we'll be able to overcome all these challenges. Thank you very much. I appreciate for giving me the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Charbugo Genko, for that. I also recognize there are some member states also from other regions who are represented. Mr. Osman Felix Kol Maleh, a Green Ambassador for the Climate Change in Sierra Leone. Mr. Osman Felix Kol, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be on this program, and I'm very much happy to be in this program. And the issue that we are discussing is very much important in order for us to have a sustainable environment, because the issue of technology has been a big problem in Africa, Sierra Leone to be specific, because as my colleague likely said, from part of other Africa country, that people that are suffering so much in terms of this technology are indigenous people who do not have access to technology, and also school-going children, which of course the world we are living is a global village. So if these school-going children do not have access to technology, that is a big problem. And for us to make sure that we combat the issue or mitigate the issue of climate change and environmental protection, then technology should play a great role in order for us to achieve a sustainable greener economy. Because when we achieve a sustainable greener economy, then that means that technology has played a part. And that is why, as a climate activist, I do solemnly agree that we need to move to green economy. We need to move to renewable energy. When we move to renewable energy, then technologies comes in like solar, wind power. These are all things that will help us in order to make sure that we have a very sustainable SDGs for the world and for a better place. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Osman Felix Kol. Next, I'd like to recognize Ms. Nora Alissa from the Energy Ministry of Saudi Arabia. Ms. Nora, if you're there, please identify yourself and we'll be able to open the microphone for you. Okay, I don't think we have the hand up, so perhaps we'll move on. I have Ms. Laura Bonilla, Forum Civ Latin America and the Caribbean region, Colombia. Ms. Laura Bonilla, you have the floor.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Thank you so much for giving me the word. Yes, as as you were asking if there is people from Latin America and the Caribbean, I assume that it's about the internet access and the digitalization of some of those spaces. But I would like to take the opportunity to speak about the importance of consider that most of the social organizations and environmental organizations that are fighting in these matters, they don't have proper access to internet and they are not located in cities, at least in Latin American region. And also, I want to raise the issue that most of these people are under a huge danger, you know, and they are under threat, especially because they work in favor of environmental issues. So I consider that this is possible to increase our commitment and to increase our work, but it's really important to take care of the people and the civil society organizations that are working for these issues, because it's not enough to involve the governments and it's not enough to involve the institutions. And most of those institutions, I am speaking only for my region, are really difficult to, you know, they are not the most committed institutions, you know, regarding environmental issues. And the civil society is key to create that pressure under that institution. So we can do basically anything we want, but it's really important to consider and protect the people who are currently working in that matter. And that includes also a fair access to internet for all. And right now, this is not possible. So, you know, the data is pretty similar to my colleagues in Africa. So it's digitalization is really something that will create more gaps for the people, especially for the people in rural areas and especially for women. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Molina, for that. Before I wrap up this session, I'd like to recognize Kenya has its hand up. Dr. Ayub Macharia, Kenya, you have the floor.
I wish to thank the facilitator for this good session and for the presenters. On innovation, the coming of COVID-19 has been...
Dr. Machar, you might want to get your mouth a little bit closer to the microphone because we hear you with a lot of noise. I think we're having audio problems also with Kenya. Okay, perhaps at this time, I'm cognizant of the time, and we'd also like to move to discussion round 3. And I believe that discussion round 3 can take in some of the comments that you might have for discussion round 2. So with your indulgence, dear participants, if you might be able to keep your hand up at the moment for the time being. And I'd like to just ask Ambassador Ibnu to wrap up this round and also to introduce the next round. Thank you very much, Ambassador Ibnu.
Thank you, Aruko. And thank you everyone for your valuable insights. Indeed, digital technology has brought us together. No matter where we are in the world, it can be a force to create even greater cooperation and solve the many challenges we face. But like every tool we build, it is wielded by humans, by us. And so it is down to us to use this technology wisely so that we can progress together and create a better and more sustainable future for everyone, everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ibnu. I'd like to perhaps ask you to set the scene for the next discussion round, which is on leveraging global and South-South cooperation for actions at scale. Please, Ambassador.
Thank you. I appreciate all comments and contributions on this round of discussion. Global partnership is indeed key to achieving progress on many global goals, particularly to enable means of implementation. South-South and triangular cooperation can be an important part of this, along with the continued strengthening of North-South collaboration. Many developing countries are struggling with their limited resources and capabilities in the path towards development and recovery. The role of global partnership is thus very crucial, and expectations are high that developed countries can take the lead in enabling means of implementation. As you know, Indonesia has taken an active part in the development of and implementation of the SSTC framework. In development cooperation, the SSTC is based on the principle of solidarity to make genuine contributions by learning, adapting best practices to the local context, and mobilizing the national potential. This model opens the path for a strong multi-stakeholder engagement, align SDGs and their targets with national plans and priorities of the countries of the South. The Stockholm Plus 50 Forum also represents that spirit of collaboration and inclusiveness. Moving forward, cooperation in innovation, investment, and technology are very necessary, including in health and COVID-19 pandemic, as well as green and sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. With that scene setter comments in mind, I'd like to open now for any discussions. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge Ms. Nandini Harihar, who has asked pre-registered for speaking slot for this agenda item. So Ms. Nandini, you have the floor.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I completely agree with what Ambassador just said on the progress needs to be equitable for global growth and for global goals. And on this, I would like to make two interventions. One is the idea that we need to do away with this idea of technology transfer and focus more on technology co-development with developing countries to sort of harness and promote more than just technology transfer and soft transfer skills and preliminary R&D, but to actually look at shared intellectual property rights between developed and developing countries to build like stronger resilience for chronic risks and against pandemics, and also build capacity in developing countries. The second thing I'd like to focus on is the need to sort of reduce this risk perception in financing and access to finance in developing countries. And for this, I'd like to focus on how can we sort of build a dedicated de-risking facility, which is a global clean investment risk mitigation mechanism, which sort of stems from this principle of risk pooling across projects and across countries to ease the flow of capital, as well as reduce the cost of capital, increase international private investment, strengthen policy and regulatory systems in developing countries to both attract and scale up clean investments in developing countries. That's all.
Thank you very much. Ms. Nandini, would you be able to elaborate what you are representing?
Oh, yes, sorry. I'm from the Council of Energy, Environment and Water. This is a policy research think tank in India, and it's headquartered in New Delhi. I'm a research analyst over there.
Okay, yes. Thank you very much, Ms. Nandini.
Thank you.
I would like to next turn to Ms. Amunke Nabweze, Parents for Future, Nigeria.
Thank you. I am Amuche Nabweze from Parents for Future Global and Nigeria, and I'm happy to speak because I have spoken in the first instance, but a lot of people have touched on the lack of infrastructure, technological infrastructure that we face in Africa, in other undeveloped countries. But in this question about cooperation between the South-South and someone has also already commented about governance, the situation of government in Nigeria, in other places, and how we as parents are organizing, because parents are everywhere Even governments are parents, even in corporations, there are parents. And then while we were filling forms today, I could notice that even though there were youths, there's no space for parents. So part of what we want to do is parents being recognized as major actors in the environmental action going on. How do we recognize parents as a group, not just as an NGO, as members of NGOs, but a strong arm that can bring about change? Because government in our situation may not be able to deliver, but parents organizing have a way of changing things. So I'll just stop there.
Thank you very much for that, Ms. Amuche. I'd like to now turn to perhaps another region, Ms. Devina Naidu from the member state, National Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, South Africa. Ms. Devina Naidu, would you be able to unmute your microphone? If not, then I will go to the next person. I would turn to Ms. probably Tetet Nera Lauren, Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung of the Philippines.
Yes, thank you very much. And actually, mine is both a comment and a question for our co-chairs. I noticed that topic 3 talks about South-South cooperation, but where does the Global North's historical responsibility and accountability come in if we want to talk about, how multilateralism can deliver sustainable development? Because as far as we know, climate crisis, poverty, underdevelopment. The global north has a lot to do about that. And it is not just a colonial history, it's a continuing legacy that we have with trade agreements that really, disadvantage the global south, illicit financial flows. And now we see that this Stockholm Plus 50 has a distinct emphasis on promoting nature-based solutions, which many in civil society feel contradicts the essence of sustainable consumption and production, which means, tackling pollution at source and not promoting false solutions that could perhaps lead to more land and resource grabs. So my question to the co-chairs, where does the Global North's responsibility towards the Global South come into the picture at Stockholm Plus 50? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that. At this juncture, I'd like to turn to the co-chair, Germany, Mr. Stephen Contius. If you also have some sort of supplementary visions and framing that you would like to state for this particular round 3, and also any reactions that you might have for the 3 or so speakers that you have so far. Mr. Contius, please.
Thank you very much. For exactly this reason, the German government decided to support efforts of several network institutions who are engaged in green recovery. One being the Partnership of Action on Green Economy page, consisting of 5 UN agencies working on this issue, and also financing the work of so-called embedded advisors for interested governments for the recovery work through the NDC partnership. We believe this is a very important task for donors to live up to challenges which poor countries are facing. And we were very impressed by the way the two network institutions carried through on this important mission. The German government is also working together with other institutions like the World Bank to be helpful in this respect. I hand over to you, Haruko.
Thank you very much, Mr. Contius, for that. I'd like to continue down the list of those who have their hands up with a little bit of a consciousness about regional distribution as well. I'd like to recognize now Mr. Nicholas Hellstrom from What Next? Mr. Nicholas, please.
Thank you. Well, I think I'd like to make a point here in terms of seeing this as a whole, where we look at the recovery and connect that to the other big topics, where of course climate change is really the sort of really pressing challenge we have also in terms of time constraints and the need to quickly reduce and dismantle and phase out fossil fuels, and just acknowledge how this is really getting a major momentum to call for stopping of all the kinds of expansion immediately, and then an equitable phase out of fossil fuels, and the idea to elevate this into a multilateral process. So the call for an international treaty on fossil fuel non-proliferation and phase out. And I think the key here is to see this happening in Stockholm, the sort of allowing that momentum to really grow and have countries to really start championing this, and also see that in the context of recovery. So the third pillar of this idea for a fossil fuel treaty is to recognize that while you reduce and get rid of fossil fuels, of course, we need to have the alternatives. And that is not just renewables, but very much a renewables kind of driven transition that ought to be just as well. So the really interesting challenge here, I think, is to see how a different model of development that is centered not just on swapping technologies, but getting a people-centered, distributed, democratized model in place, where you build communities by diversified ownership over renewables, where you have local economies thrive across the world, where you really anchor the quest for a sufficiency-oriented, well-being-oriented economic model based on this vision of a new energy system that is then founded and funded by, exactly as was raised just now, the kind of agreement that we need to have in terms of paying climate debts to really operationalize and instrumentalize equity and see this as a cooperative scheme. We all, rich and poor countries alike, need to ensure and enable this transition to happen, and to put this all into one comprehensive framework as reducing, scaling down, stopping expansion, phasing out fossil fuels, and enabling the transition to a different future through renewables and of course ecological agriculture and so on and so forth is really what I think we need to see taking real speed and momentum in Stockholm.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hellstrom, for that. I'd like to now turn to, I believe, Ms. Laura Bonilla. We tried to give you the floor and failed the last time. Ms. Laura Bonilla, are you still wishing to raise your hand?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. No, I want to raise the issue with, I want to answer the question about the South-South cooperation. And I think that we should talk about the global cooperation because the budget for South-South cooperation is not enough. And most of the budget in the countries are located in strategic issues like share energy and non-sustainable energy necessary. And also, in military cooperation in some cases, speaking about Latin America especially, and not necessarily the cooperation between countries in the global south will focus the efforts to protect the climate and to protect the environment. So this is very important to support the natural experience of civil society and social organizations in the global south. And I am speaking about this because most of the cooperation to development from the global north to the south is focalized in government and is focalized in governmental budgets and supporting projects or initiatives just based in private sector or things like this, and not considering the strong effort that the small and grassroots organizations are doing to protect the environment. I'm talking especially about the indigenous people and the indigenous organizations in the global south. And there is a lot of networks and there is a lot of experiences based on social organizations and civil society that they are already working. And that is a good starting point to put the efforts despite the other, the other side of possibilities. And if you see the importance right now of the Amazonas for the world and the lack of resources to work between countries, you can understand why I am speaking about that.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Bonilla, for that. I'd like to continue to go down the list of hands for a little bit. Mr. Saurabh Sonwani, you have the floor. Mr. Saurabh. Mr. Saurabh, your microphone is open. Okay, perhaps we'll hold for Mr. Saurabh, who might be adjusting his audio. So I'd like to go next now down the list to Ms. Susana Baria, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My apologies. I think it's important that we remember that all states have an obligation for solidarity under international law. And while South-South solidarity is fundamental, however, it cannot be a replacement for North-South obligations. Those obligations include, for instance, development assistance and climate finance. As such, and such assistance should be new and additional and supportive of South-South collaboration. So this is the first initial point. The second point is to say that South-South collaboration and knowledge exchange has been hindered by international trade regime and intellectual property rights regime in the past already. Two instances, one is about the seizure of shipment of generic medicines from India to Brazil by Dutch authorities, invoking a European intellectual property rights on transit of goods. This consignment was for blood pressure drugs that were off patent in India and Brazil, but was seized on the grounds that it was patented in the Netherlands. This gives an understanding of how intellectual property rules can impact negatively on cooperation, South-South cooperation. A similar case to highlight is that of local production of solar cells in India. This was a component of the Indian solar mission that promoted national ecologically sustainable growth and energy security. The mission included an obligation to purchase electricity from locally produced solar cells. And this was questioned by the World Trade Organization and had to be discontinued. I want to highlight that these kind of measures need to be tackled if we want to ensure that South-South cooperation can be effective. And the overwhelming support for a waiver of TRIPS obligations on COVID-19 technologies is a sign of interest of sharing and cooperation, in low and middle income countries that we can't ignore. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. I just recognize that we have about 10 minutes left, 10, 15 minutes left for the discussion. So I'm closing the list with what we have as of 1 minute ago. And I'll just go down that list while we are preparing also the co-chair's summary. But at this juncture, perhaps I'd like to see if Mr. Stefan Contius would like to come back to give any feedback, or if we are able to continue on with interventions. Mr. Stefan Contius, please.
Please continue with the interventions, and of course, feel free to call upon also the UNEP Secretariat and others.
Thank you very much, sir, for that. Now, I would like to go down the list. I recognize Mr. Francis McGuire. Again, I'd like to ask you to state what your affiliation is before you make your statement.
Thank you.
Ms. Francis, sorry about that.
That's right, yes, it's Dr. Francis McGuire, actually. I'm head of policy for the LUTSIC countdown on climate and health, on health and climate action. I just wanted to flag actually that we have regional centres in Latin America, small and developing states, the Gambia and China. And one of the key points I'd like to share here is that we're very conscious through the work that we're doing of the lack of data on the impacts of climate change on health, and the lack of research. But we're at the forefront really of starting work on climate change and health in regional centres around the globe. And a call really, or a comment to Stockholm 50 around the possibilities of the meeting, both raising the importance of health as we come out of the pandemic. If nothing else, the pandemic has shown the importance of human health, has shown our dependence on people being healthy for our economies to function, and our need to be healthy. And that's been really emphasised through the pandemic. And to highlight the health benefits of taking action on climate, so more investment in active travel and switching away from the private car and dependency on fossil fuels, and improvement of air quality will come with that, but also the health benefits of access to nature. So natural solutions for their own self, but also for, and I just wanted to flag that right now there's a conference being done by the Financial Times on climate capital, and Prime Minister Motley has given a really important presentation this morning about the need to move from short-term debt payments to long-term debt payments to help small and developing states in particular adapt to climate change.
Thank you very much, Dr. McGuire, for that. I'd like to now to go down the list, if possible. I'd like to perhaps see if Mr. Saurabh Sonwani was able to fix his or her audio. Would you be able to speak? We still don't hear, unfortunately. Perhaps then I will move to Mr. Arab Hobala, please.
Thank you very much. I will be very brief since I had a previous intervention. I'm referring to the South-South cooperation and the replication of technologies, which should not only focus really on technologies, but on building public-private partnerships within an enabling ecosystem of multiple private sector and public sector actors, focusing on curated dialogues between the stakeholders that can advance policy implementation while scaling up bottom-up innovation driven by small and medium enterprises, not only big companies, hand in hand with the public sector. Only SMEs in collaboration with large companies and public sector actors bring the much needed mix of expertise to ensure the technology transfer to be successful in the long run within the global south and between the global south and the global north. This not only demands for multi-stakeholder involvement, but also the understanding of successful technology trajectories. Hence, we believe there is a place for a global coalition on innovation, circularity, entrepreneurship that curates the technology trajectory and help delivering from a collective perspective the sustainable development goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. I'd like to go down the list. We'll try again after the next speaker. Mr. or Ms. Aditi Mishal, you have the floor.
Yep. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Am I audible here?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Yeah, so my point here where the actual decision happens in regards with the waste management in the circular economy approach. There, the model is not available where they can access to understanding of what are the viable solutions for, waste to some upcycled product. So, we have to think of creating a simulated decision-making model which can guide and which can look at the scaling up and other features according to the geographical constraints. Different variables could be looked into, and such simulated decision making model should be available for local government to take decision when it comes to addressing waste or climate change or energy for that matter. So that's my that's input from my side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Ms. Michelle. I would like to turn and see if Mr. Saurabh Sonwani would be able to make himself or herself audible. Unfortunately not. So I have just the last speaker, Mr. Santosh Kumar Venugopalan. You have the floor, and we will close this discussion session and turn to the co-chairs.
Yeah. Good evening. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Chair Madam. This is Dr. V. Santosh Kumar, a professor from India, wants to highlight the general points such as Mother Nature oriented science is good for the planet and it can able to prevent the pandemic situations. And the second point is about the traditional system of medicine in each and every country, and also the vaccination can able to boost the body's immune system and can prevent the pandemic situation. Thank you very much, Chair, for your recognition.
Thank you very much for that. I'd like to now close the discussion, and before I turn to the co-chairs for the summary, I would like to just draw your attention to a couple of questions that have been sent in the Q&A. The first question I have is, how is the South-South cooperation play a key role in the implementation of nature-based solutions in the developing countries, taking into account the elements of climate change and meeting the Sustainable Development Goals? I would like to see if either of the co-chairs might be willing to respond to that, or anybody from the resource persons from the UNEP or the co-hosts. I'm just looking around virtually to see if anybody would like to answer that question. Yes, Stephen, you have your physical hand up.
Thanks, Haruko. It's been a great discussion. There's so much input and feedback coming in from the chat box that it's really, really hard to capture it all. But on the question of global South-South cooperation, I just wanted to share an example from actually from Kyrgyzstan. Stefan Contius mentioned the PAGE partnership earlier. And as part of the PAGE team, we worked closely with the officials from Kyrgyzstan on Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Development, on their green development pathway. And the interesting thing was they learned a lot more from their neighbors, actually in Mongolia, who are also PAGE partners, than they did from us. And so that peer-to-peer learning, I think, is really, really interesting. And we have to think a little bit more about how we can enable that and leverage that so we learn more from our peers as we're learning together. That's my reflection, Haruko. Back over to you.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for that. I have a couple of questions that have been asked on the Q&A. There's another question. All states have an obligation for solidarity under international law. South-South solidarity is fundamental. However, how do we ensure it is not seen or implicitly proposed as a replacement for North-South obligations? Would anybody like to take on this question? Stephen, yes, please.
Without prejudice to what the co-chairs or the co-hosts may have to say on this question, I think it's incredibly relevant, because basically what the question is asking us is how do we go beyond what's currently on the table? And so there is South-South collaboration, which is tremendously important. There's also North-South collaboration, and there's South-North collaboration as well. And I think given where we are in 2022, and we're 50 years on from when the first Stockholm conference happened, we need all options on the table. We need all solutions on the table. And I think at this point, as it's in the title, it's about opportunities and it's about responsibilities. And I feel that we all have tremendous opportunities, but we also have tremendous responsibilities. So that's just my first thought. We need all options on the table. Thanks, Rico.
Thank you very much for that, Stephen. I have one last question, which was actually posted a little bit earlier during the discussion regarding international trade treaties. International trade treaties, such as free trade agreements, are important elements of the international trade architecture within which supply chains function. Such treaties influence trading patterns and value chain structures. However, many countries use the prerogative of the executive in signing international treaties to escape due diligence over these deals. This creates a gap that is harmful to promoting a circular economy and sustainable consumption and production. How can this be addressed? Would either co-chairs like to address this, or should we go back to Stephen again?
If I may answer this question, Haruko? Yeah, I'll make a short answer on this. I think the many FTAs nowadays are equipped with dedicated chapter of trade and sustainable development. So this is a much welcome trend that we need to further support. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Ambassador Ibnu. Now I'd like to now turn to the last part of this 2.5-hour informal working group meeting, which is a summary from the co-chairs and next steps. So I'd like to now turn to Ambassador Ibnu and Commissioner Stefan Contius for the wrap-up session, please.
Thank you for the wrap-up session. Actually, there is a lot to say from me. The pandemic has highlighted the need for better foresight, capability, and resilience planning in national and global governance. Access to the internet is a key requirement to participate in the digital economy. And unless we ensure that we leave no one behind, we risk losing those with lower incomes and living in remote communities out of the global economic system and exacerbating divergences. The current IP and trade regulations are also limiting access to key digital public goods, and we need to think seriously about urgent reform to ensure more equitable access to opportunities for all, especially for developing countries. Going beyond GDP to incorporate qualitative aspects of growth in measuring progress is important. You can only manage something if you can measure it. Financial institutions have a key role to play in realizing the promise of Stockholm plus 50. However, this requires a fundamental change in incentives and values. Change starts at the top, and more conscious efforts at leadership training and education could be crucial for systemic shifts in the financial sector sections and aligning them with the SDGs. Our current modes of consumption and production are clearly unsustainable, and we need scaled-up incentives to shift demand patterns towards more sustainable goods and services. Civil society organizations are key to holding government accountable. We need to protect their rights and provide civil society and youth with transparent and credible data on progress made by governments and analysis of environmental data. For the concrete recommendation for action, we heard suggestions for better tax policy to ensure equitable distribution and more thoughtful and considerate digital trade rules that leave no one behind. We also heard about the need for greening the global maritime industry, and some participants also suggested ways and means to strengthen shift towards sustainable consumption and production. We also heard calls from the Stockholm Plus 50 Youth Task Force representative Forward Environment Situation Room to be strengthened and positioned as the global central hub for credible environmental data analysis and communication. Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you so
Ambassador.
much. Thank you very much indeed. This was a very comprehensive wrap-up of what we heard, so I will not add on that. I think what we heard were many valuable, substantial proposals, as mentioned by my colleague from Indonesia, and we will use these input comments and suggestions for further work on the preparation for Leadership Dialogue 2. We believe that transparent outreach to stakeholders is key to such conferences, and we very much applaud the way Kenya and Sweden organize the preparations in this respect. We would like to thank the Secretariat of UNEP to be involved in this and to work for a good outcome. We are looking forward to the preparatory meeting, March 28th in New York City. And we believe that together, governments, stakeholders, youth, many which are already involved, can make sure that the conference in June will be a success. Thank you so much. Giving back now to the UNEP Secretariat.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ignu and then Commissioner Stefan Contius for your words and the wrap-up session. I'd like to now turn to closing. I'd like to turn to the co-hosts, Sweden and Kenya, if you'd like to make any feedbacks, remarks, and comments also on the way forward. I see Cecilia, would you like to go first? Sweden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Haruko, and thanks for a very interesting discussion, a lot to digest and to sort of take into account. So very, very happy to have been part of all the interventions and discussions that have taken place in the chat and via your interventions. I think maybe if, and Haruko, I'll hand over to you if there is anything to say related to next steps in terms of next meetings, which I think will be planned for later on in the spring, but we will have the preparatory meeting in New York on the 28th of March coming before that, of course. So I hand back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sweden, for that. I'd like to see if Kenya, co-host, would also like to make any final words of feedback for this Leadership Dialogue informal working group discussion. Kenya? Okay, perhaps there might be some audio problem there as well. Okay, so perhaps in response to, while we're waiting, in response to what Sweden has mentioned about the way forward, I would just like to make some announcements. First of all, I'd like to very much thank you on behalf of UNEP, the Secretariat, for this meeting, for your very active and interactive discussions. And we very much appreciate a variety of your interventions and ideas and views and your suggestions, concerns, etc. And I think we had a very wide wealth of conversation here that was possible. We also recognize that in the chat box, there has been quite also active discussions going on. And we have been quite impressed by the discussions that went on as well especially for those perhaps when the audio system didn't work. I think nowadays written exchange of information and communication has been as useful as the oral ones. So we will make sure that we capture both the oral interventions that have been made and also the comments made in the chat box. And lastly, any written interventions for those who have not been able to make your oral intervention or who haven't been able to speak enough in this 2.5 hours, you will have about 24 hours, probably about 30 hours for you to use the Google form that you have been given the link in the last email you received when you have the link to this meeting. That is where you will be able to send in your written intervention regarding these discussion themes that we have talked about in the last 2.5 hours. And we very much like you to provide those inputs that will become very much the fuel for the writing team who will be revising the background document in readiness for the preparatory meeting to be held on the 28th of March. We will also hope to have another perhaps 1 or 2 or 3 rounds of the meeting of the informal working groups in the future. And for those future meetings, I'll be able to make the announcements at a future time. With that, I'd like to very much thank you, first and foremost, the co-hosts, Sweden and Kenya, as well as the co-chairs, Ambassador Ibnu and Commissioner Stefan Concius, especially for Indonesia. It's quite late, so thank you very much for staying awake until this late hour and for your very much able and expert guidance of this discussion group. And we very much are in your hands to get the leadership dialogue facing in the direction that we would like and that all of us would like to see. So we very much thank you for your staying online also for the long hours. And we hope to keep in touch with you in the future. Thank you very much to all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Haruko.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you again. Thank you.
Bye.